Howdy y'all, Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am back today with another weekly update. We did get a bit of rain this week. We had a pretty intense storm come through and it has been relatively cloudy ever since, so the temperatures are mild for early in June. But let's go ahead and walk around and see what's going on. All right, we're going to kick things off over here in the wild and unruly tomato patch. You can see tomato plants are kind of sprawling out of the bed, along the ground, up and around and through everything and all over the place. That's what tomatoes do if you don't keep them contained, and this has been a terribly busy week for me, so tomatoes are not contained and they're going everywhere. But some things that are going on. In this bed, I planted some green patty pan squash at the ends, and then I planted a Black Beauty zucchini in the middle underneath this. They have not germinated yet, but the seeds are there. They should germinate within the next couple of days since it has been rainy and not so intensely hot. I have begun harvesting Invincible Paste tomatoes, which is this plant on the end here that's kind of going in two different directions. I haven't harvested anything off of this second plant. I don't know what it is. And then I have harvested a couple of the Thorburns terracotta. So this row, we are starting to get stuff coming in. The red onions, of course, were harvested. There's a video up detailing that. And then along the front here, we have cayennes, and then we have some habaneros and a Thai red chili. You can see this guy is mega productive, a ton of peppers on it. Once they get ripe, we'll harvest them off, and my husband likes to eat them in stir fries and stuff, and then I also use the excess as like crushed red pepper. We also have habaneros here. The plant has several on it, if you can bear with me while I juggle the plant around here. So again, this is another one that we're just kind of waiting on them to ripen up, and then my husband, maybe my son, will get to enjoy those. And then cayennes, on the ends there's Buena Mulata, which is like a purple cayenne type. We've been harvesting those pretty frequently. And then we have Arapaho cayenne, which is a hybrid variety that produces like a big giant. They are relatively spicy according to my husband and my son. So these are being used for crushed red pepper as well. For companion plants that are contributing to the jungle factor in here, calendula, still super productive. We still have a nasturtium trucking along right here that's causing a bit of the chaos here because it's a trailing variety, so it's just going out everywhere. And I think that might be all of the companions over here. I thought there was marigolds, but I think they were along the back and maybe they got suffocated by all of this that's happening right here in the middle. All right, this bed has indeterminate varieties of tomatoes all the way down. They're intensely chaotic and wild and crazy. And then we have jalapenos at this end and serranos at that end, and then we have yellow patty pan squash planted in this bed. There's 3 plants total, or sorry, there's seeds planted in 3 spots total. This one has germinated, and I think this one popped up this morning right here. So we're just waiting on that last one down there. And then I have been harvesting Super Sioux tomatoes, which is this one right here. You can see that one is starting to get kind of blush. And then Juliet, which is right here. There's a couple that can be harvested from over here. I don't think I've harvested any other tomatoes from any of the other plants. We have Black Beauty. This will be completely like super dark purple. It looks black whenever it's ready, and of course it'll be kind of soft to the touch, so those aren't ready yet. We have Wagner's blue green over here, and then we have pumpkin spice jalapeno there. So once that gets ripe, I'll take that in. We have lemon, spice jalapeno here. Looks like I need to come out and do a harvest. We have brown jalapeno here, I think. No, that's Jedi. So this one is the brown jalapeno right here. We have Jedi, and then Pantera, and then just a regular jalapeno variety, and then we get into the serranos all the way to the end. And the hybrid variety of serrano that I'm growing this year is Trapeo, and these are also a giant variety. So you can see here, that is a serrano pepper and not a jalapeno. It's huge. The companion plants contributing to this overall chaos jungle, we have a few types of basil in here. This one is going to flower. It's still perfectly usable. A lot of people say that it changes the flavor. I have not noticed that, and I've used it in anything from teas to fresh to dried. So I guess that's just personal preference if you want to continue to use it after it goes to flower. I will say pollinators love these flowers, so if you're trying to do more to draw in pollinators, let that basil flower. We also have calendula. I need to come out here and deadhead, but you can see this one is an extremely heavy flowering type, so it's really lovely. Marigolds here, nasturtiums over there. I don't think that one's a trailing one. It's just huge. More nasturtiums over here, calendula here, marigolds. We have a lemon thyme there, and then spicy globe basil there. So we have companion plants, food plants, flowering plants, all living cohesively within the same space. The bed is very full, of course, but there's a ton of food coming in and out of here, so I kind of like it that way. And then this bed, this one is also a chaos jungle, as you can see. Along the back of it is cherry tomatoes that are sprawling and going 17 different directions. I definitely need to get out here and work on trellising and pruning and sort of getting these guys back under control. Hopefully after tomorrow things kind of slow down, but it's just a really hectic week, so getting out here and trellising tomatoes is not making it on the to-do list. But I have been harvesting quite a few. I'm going to actually have to go ahead and dehydrate my first round of cherry tomatoes because there's more in there than I can eat, and I'm the only one that eats them fresh. So I have harvested tomatoes off of every plant in this bed, and still in the running for the best tasting is going to be the Sun Gold, which is somewhere over here, and it just has the best flavor out of everything that I've tried this year. The Midnight Snack also has a really good flavor. This one is decent, like it's worth growing because it's super prolific and it does have a decent taste. And then the green one has like a little bit of a green apple taste, but also a green tomato taste. So it's good, but if you don't like, like green tomato, probably, I don't know. I think it's worth trying. I think it's worth growing. It's definitely a good producer. Most of the wildness right here is from that plant, so we're gonna get a ton more tomatoes off of it. I'll probably grow it again because it does give me so many tomatoes, but it's not my favorite tasting out of all of them. In here, there's also tomatillos, which it looks like I need to come through and start doing some harvesting because the husks on them are starting to dry out, which means salsa verde in my future. And then we have some dill that's looking pretty good, pickle bush cucumbers, loaded down with blooms. I haven't picked any fruits off of here yet, but I'm not disappointed. We have tricolor sage, bringing up the perennial herb front and a grasshopper, rude. We have some eggplants along here. There's 3 different types of eggplant. These 2 are Thanos. They're just a hybrid purple variety, which looks like this. It doesn't get super big. It actually won't get much bigger than that. And then we have Listata digiandia here, which there's one growing, and then shooting stars next to it, somewhere in there. More tomatillos. And then in the middle, I planted blue goose cowpeas. There were bush beans. They were done producing, so I got rid of those. got the cowpeas planted in, and they're starting to germinate. So here within a month or so, we should start seeing peas come out of here. The rest of the companion plants filling in this chaos jungle. Obviously we have marigolds, there's some borage, nasturtiums. This is cherry rose jewel here. We have basil in here somewhere. There's some basil there. And then more marigolds, calendula. I just kind of fill these beds as full as I can get them. I don't like to leave too much empty space. It helps, the sun beats in there. If there's too much empty space, and dries the soil out. It creates kind of a place for pests to kind of congregate. I really like just keeping the space super full and lush, even though it gets wild and I can't get down the aisles by the end of the summer. But that is the tomato patch situation, and even though it's super wild, I do love it. I can't get down the aisles all the way, but it's still one of my favorite parts of the garden. All right, coming in over here into the ochre patch. This is obviously looking a lot more full and lush than it has in previous weekly updates. If you have watched any of the older videos, you will know that I have been treating these beds very regularly with liquid Neptune's Harvest fertilizer and earthworm castings. There was a bit of a nitrogen lock issue due to some compost that wasn't fully broken down. I think we're getting that more under control here, because you can see stuff is definitely putting on lots of growth at this point. I also came through last week and harvested any peppers that were growing on these plants, which was really helpful because we got a ton of new leaves, we got a ton of new blooms. There's a couple of these plants that have little baby peppers on them right here. These are bell peppers here. So I'm really glad that I did that. So if you're dealing with some peppers that maybe it seems like they're not growing like as tall or as bushy as they should, and they have fruit on them, go ahead and pull those peppers off and see if that will help trigger some growth within your plants. Some other things that are growing in here are zucchini. This is green zebra. This is a hybrid variety from Haas Tools, and I have not been able to get out here and be really meticulous about checking for squash vine borer eggs, and it is starting to fall. It is starting to get quite a bit of pressure from squash vine borers. However, it doesn't seem to really be affecting the growth of the plant yet. There's still a ton of healthy leaves. It's still blooming regularly. It's still growing. So I'm just gonna leave it at this point and see how long it lives without me, facilitating any sort of pest remediation. You can see here, maybe you can see here where the vine borers have entered, and you can see their frass there and there. But like I said, it doesn't seem to be slowing down the growth of that plant, so I'm just holding out hope that maybe I found a variety that I could grow here in North Texas that won't, succumb to the squash vine borers so early in the growing season. These are I think these are the purple TP bush beans. I need to go ahead and pull these out and get cowpeas planted in here. These are just about done, even though they do have blooms. Wow, actually, let me take that back. I'm gonna leave these for another week or so because those are still heavily blooming. Usually with most of my other bush beans, they bloom once, they set fruit once, and then they fizzle out and start dying. They've completed their life cycle. But these looks like these are going to have like a second flush. So I'm gonna hang on to these. Right here, this is a camo squash. This is a New Zealand hybrid variety type. And again, I haven't been out here to do any sort of pest remediation on this, but it seems to be holding up all right. I did see squash bugs on here the other day, so I think some of the yellow leaves is from those, but I smushed them. I killed them dead. But it still seems to be growing pretty healthy. It looks like maybe it's going to start blooming relatively soon. This is a vining type, so it's gonna kind of take over this bed. I'm okay with that. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm really hoping this is my year to finally get some squash. I have not been successful in growing it at this house yet. Usually by the time the plants start blooming, they are already falling pressure to some sort of pest, and that's usually around the time life gets super chaotic and I can't be out here to maintain some sort of pest control. So yeah, the pests always get my plants before I get the harvest. So hopefully this is the year where I can get at least something for all of the hard work. All of these beans here that aren't purple, these are all dragon tongue bush beans, and there's still a few blooms, so I guess these will get to hang out here a little while longer too. So that actually makes me kind of happy, because the dragon tongue bush beans are actually my favorite of all of the bush beans, so I'm happy that they kind of get to stick around for a little while longer. Along here we have a little beginning to some chaos, which I'm totally okay with. So right here we have I can't remember which melon this is, Hamey melon here, and as it gets taller I'm going to try to wrap it around that so that it'll climb the trellis. This is the green yard long noodle bean, and then we have butterfly pea flower here and here. These are still really slow growing, so I'm just kind of trying to baby them until they can begin climbing. And then I planted, let's see if you can see it even. Okay, the calendula, the storm knocked the calendula over, so I'll try to make it go that way for a minute. This is Malabar spinach. I planted new Malabar spinach because this one has been stuck in the same exact size for quite a while. And then over here I also planted butternut squash, so just waiting on that to germinate. Obviously this is more dill. I grew this as a companion for the cucumbers that never did anything over here. But I figure, you know, if it attracts swallowtail butterflies, then that can be a host plant for the caterpillars. And then along the back, I'm not going to walk back there because it's incredibly swampy from the storm. Along the back we have okra. So we have full-size varieties closest to the edge there, and then these that are a little bit closer to the middle are all a dwarf variety. Now that it is kind of starting to warm up, the okra should really start putting on a ton of growth. And I am still doing the liquid fertilizer, earthworm casting, remediation to try to help boost the growth of these plants a little bit more until I'm content with where they're at. The same companion plants are in here in terms of flowers and herbs. So we have basil. We have a few varieties of basil in here. We have marigolds, we have calendula, we have nasturtiums. So just again, another very full space, trying to maximize every square inch of the bed without wasting any space for anything. Oh yes, and then we have this partial eclipse squash. This one has actually put on a substantial amount of growth just this week. Last week it was maybe like that tall, so you can see how much has grown this week. And we have this radish here to hopefully ward off some squash bugs. We'll see if it works. All right, underneath the trellis we have some sunflowers blooming. So this is the Darjeeling variety, and I'm going to try to turn these. That's the Darjeeling. I really love the color of that. And then these are going to be Marl's mix from Sunflower Steve. So this one is definitely more stripy, really cool looking, but this one is just like bicolor, also very cool looking. So these are so joyful. I wanted the sunflowers here to bring a pop of joy underneath what I had hoped would be a really cool vining trellis situation. There's no vining trellis situation at the moment, but there is happiness, so not a disappointment in the least. Okay, over here in this bed, it's kind of the reverse of the other bed. It has a lot of similar plants, just different varieties for the most part. Now there is no partial eclipse squash here because the squash vine borers wiped it out literally like the day after I filmed my weekly update last week. And then we have a Kajari melon here. And then this is a red noodle bean. I planted dragon gourd underneath those bolts there, and then next to that was another Malabar spinach because that one also has not grown any farther. So I'm really trying to get something going up this trellis here. This is the Blue Lake bush beans. You can see they're still deep in the throes of production. I'm harvesting pretty regularly. Looks like some sort of something nibbled that one, but you can see it's just like your typical French style green bean. Farther down we have like the flat style green bean, but the other two squash types are the same as the other end, where we have the camo vining and then we have the green zebra zucchini. Now I mentioned that radish as a companion plant for the partial eclipse squash. This is what it does. It goes to flower, which the flowers are really cute, you can see, and then the flowers will then create seed pods, which is these right here. They'll fill up with all kinds of little seeds. Now once this happens, that is whenever it is supposedly the most effective at pest control. We'll see. Again, this is the experimental phase of trying to figure out if this actually works as a squash bug solution. This squash plant has also become victim to squash vine borer damage, but again, it is also still creating new leaves and blooms and all of those things. So we're just in a kind of a wait and see pattern with those. If I am able to catch them off, I kill it if I can. They dart in and out though, and I'm not always out here. I've only seen 2, I think, and they were quick, so I wasn't able to get them. But over here we have candy cane chocolate cherry peppers, and I did the same thing that I did in the other bed where I removed all of the bell peppers and poblanos from those plants, and that also triggered growth on these plants. So there's a lot more leaves, we have new blooms, we have new peppers. This is a shishito. I have just been kind of babying it along because it hasn't been doing the greatest, and the second one that was planted in here actually I accidentally killed whenever I was treating some ants. So I have one shishito this year, but it looks like it's finally starting to put on some good growth. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these candy cane chocolate cherry pepper plants. These are a sweet pepper. They're like a snacking size. They don't get as big as bell peppers before they get ripe. So they'll get maybe that big, and then they're kind of shaped like a bell pepper but smaller essentially, and then they will ripen. They'll still have the variegation whenever they're ripe, but yeah, we just eat them as like a snack, or I just use them the same way that I use bell peppers. And then of course along the back we have more okra. Same situation. The ones closer to the edge are the taller full-size varieties, and then the ones closer to the middle are going to be the dwarf varieties, or I just have one dwarf variety. Same companion plant situation. Lots of basil in here, as you can see. We have some borage there, marigolds. Here's some calypso cilantro, calendula, nasturtium here, more basil, marigolds, petunias there. Those are going to be on the way out soon as we start to get closer and closer into the depths of summer. Whenever it's hot nonstop, those will completely fizzle out. I put them in here in early spring just to have something with some life in here while I was waiting for everything else to grow, because most of this was planted by seed and not by transplant. Only the sweet peppers and some of the companion plants were transplanted in. Everything else was from seed. So just babying these 2 beds along while the nitrogen situation gets rectified. I will say this one has always looked a bit better than that one, but it was still kind of more slow growing than the 3 tomato beds. So I wanted to go ahead and remediate this one too, or repair the soil in this one too. That way none of the plants would suffer at any point through the growing season. Okay, over here in front of the greenhouse, I planted Montana lavender clay corn. It is a shorter variety. It only gets about 3 foot tall, as you can see here. I do have a few corns. I think this one's actually ready because it's starting to dry out. Yeah, that popped right off. I was not very diligent in trying to pollinate these, and it didn't grow enough to ensure 100% pollination. So I'm happy with what I'm getting here, except for the ant bite. I'm not happy about that. I'm happy with what I got here because I really just grew this for fun, and I thought it would look really cool in front of the greenhouse growing. So aside from the corn, I have blue spice basil, and then the blue borage that the storm knocked over, and now it's growing kind of wild and out into the yard and everywhere. And then there is also gypsy sunshine marigold, which you can't see in that one, but you can see here. So as these continue to dry and stuff, I'll get them harvested off of the stalks. All right, over here, this was the garlic patch. Now it is converted into a sunflower patch. I planted sunflower seeds a week ago today. Some of them have sprouted, so you can see here, and there was another one. Okay, and you can see here, the roly-polies are already wiping out the sunflower sprouts. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on this one, and if it gets taken out, and there's some slugs there too, you can see them right there. I'm going to come in with something to treat them, and then replant the sunflower patch, because I would rather have sunflowers than roly-polies and slugs any day of the week. So yeah, that's another nibbled one there. Rude, rude, rude. All right, over here in the flower bed, this is gonna be the biggest change this week. Previously, prior to an hour and a half ago, there were zinnias in here, and then there was also Henry Dulberg salvia, which is also known as mealy cup sage, and that is a Texas native. However, it grew far more wild than I wanted my flower bed to be back here. So I went ahead and I cut down all of the salvia. There was 5 of them back here, and then I cut down all of the zinnias because they had powdery mildew. I do have some seedlings over there that are just about ready to transplant in, so maybe by next week's update we'll have little baby zinnias and cosmos and sunflowers in here. Other than those 2 plants, everything else got left. So we have night and day snapdragon. This has perennialized at this point. This is the 3rd spring summer season in this location, and all I do is water it fertilize it, and you trim off any sort of like spent flower heads, and it has continued to grow and do pretty well for me. We also have some other snapdragons over here. That is an echinacea, although I'm not sure what type. This is also an echinacea that the salvia knocked forward, so hopefully now that it has more room, it can go back to where it belongs. We do have a couple of milkweeds in here as well, that I'll point out as I get to them. That is one, and that is one, and then that taller one is one. We have petunias, we have marigolds. This petunia, this is Rudbeckia. I think it is Sahara, if I remember correctly. And kind of on down the line, this is Rudbeckia. This is that other milkweed that I was trying to point out. And then we have calendula. This is a feverfew that volunteered, and then, or it came back from last year. More petunias. And then on down, it kind of just repeats the same cycle to the end, except the hollyhock. This is kind of starting to fizzle out a little bit. So I'm going to wait and see if it dies back completely, or if it's just gonna like lose its flowers and stay green, because I haven't grown one to a blooming stage before. From my understanding, they die, but I have also seen some that bloomed 2 years in a row before they ultimately died. So I'm not gonna cut that down until I know for sure what it's doing. But we have, again, the same situation all the way to the end over here with the Rudbeckia, echinacea, milkweeds, petunias, snapdragons, marigolds, did I say that already? And all of that. Over here we have gaillardia. So you can see it is blooming. This I just bloomed this year, so I'm surprised to see that it's blooming, but definitely not disappointed in that. So this one is the Indian blanket, which is the traditional like Texas native type that you see on the side of the road or in ditches or what have you. So it kind of makes me happy that I still have some natives in here, even though I removed the salvia. This green stalk here, I just planted pigeon peas into, and that might be a pigeon pea sprout. I'm gonna give that a little bit more time to see. So pigeon peas are a legume that are typically grown in the Caribbean. They're used in Jamaican food with like pigeon peas and rice. That's one of their side dishes. So I had the seeds. I thought I would just see how they do here in the green stalk before it gets transitioned for fall planting, because they weren't gonna go anywhere else in the garden anyway. So we shall see what happens with those. Hopefully now that that salvia isn't hogging the early morning sunshine, these will do pretty well. All right, up on the patio where I have planted ginger and turmeric, both containers that have ginger have little ginger shoots. So there's one in each. I am expecting more, but we'll see what happens. This one sprouted first, so we'll see if we get any more coming out of this container. And then we have turmeric over here, but nothing has happened with this yet. It takes longer to sprout compared to ginger even, so it's going to be just kind of a wait and see on this whole situation. All right, pepper green stalk. That's what I'm still calling this, even though it does have a couple of tomato plants left in it and it has eggplants on the bottom. For the most part, it is growing peppers. It is hot peppers in here, and what I'm trying to do is see if the production in this compares to the production in the raised beds in any way at all to make it worth it to grow peppers in the green stalk. The varieties that are in here are also out there, so we'll just kind of compare to see. I mean, obviously I expect those to be far more productive. They have more space, they have more soil, all of that stuff, but I just want to see if it is valuable to keep trying to grow food in this green stalk, or if it should just be transitioned to herbs and or flowers. But I have gotten some peppers off of here and some tomatoes, so I'm gonna say yes, it's worth it, even if it's not as much as over there. The fact that this is in 2 square foot of space does make it valuable for like a small space or patio gardener, and it's also really convenient to walk 15 feet from the door to this to grab something compared to having to go fish it out of the jungle over there. But what we have going on over here, now that I've jibber-jabbered for 87,000 minutes, we have lots of jalapenos, which you can see here. There are some serranos, there's some cayennes, there's some eggplant down here. This one had a few that like stopped growing and turned orange, so I went ahead and I pulled them off. You can see it has more blooms. I think this one, yeah, this one has one growing. So that's the Listada di Giandia. So you can see it's kind of variegated and stripy, really cool. So this one is shooting stars, and it's also going to be variegated and stripy like that. I'm not even sure if there's any difference other than the name. We'll find out whenever we cut it open and cook it and taste it, I guess. And then more jalapenos, Thai red chili. So I actually need to come harvest a few of these and put them in my husband's dinner. And then we have 2 tomato plants left up here. This is a dwarf Mallee rose. It's getting ready to bloom. It was far behind the other dwarf varieties, so that's why it's a little slow there. I don't know, I think this one might be a fat frog. Once I harvest the tomatoes off of here, this one is going to be removed, thrown in the trash, you can see it's got spider mites. So I'm going to attempt to show you guys spider mites there-ish. That's a spider mite problem. And then over here, we have some spider mite issues. So high pressure water can get the problem back under control, but because these are determinate varieties, I'm just gonna pull the tomatoes and then remove the plant, and it'll be, you know, we'll just start with a clean slate. I think I'm going to put basil up here, aside from that volunteer pepper plant. I don't know what that is, so we'll see. But I'm gonna put basil up here to act as a deterrent for hornworms, because I did have a hornworm come in and wipe out this plant pretty good, although it's putting on lots of new leaves, so it is bouncing back. And I don't want them to eat the rest of my peppers because I'm growing them for a reason. They're for me to eat, not the caterpillars. Strawberries, surprisingly, there's a tree in my face. Surprisingly, there are a few still out here. Oh, that's a good sized one. Look at this. Look at that. I'm gonna have Lily come pick that. She'll love it. Right around this time is whenever strawberries kind of fizzle out here in North Texas, because it does get quite hot. They don't like producing in the heat. So then it just becomes a game of keeping the plant alive until the next season. Last year, this is in the exact same spot it was in last year. So this tree provided quite a bit of shade for this, helped keep this cool. It does get late afternoon sun from there until about there, which is only like 2 to 3 hours. So it does get some hot sun, but like I said, it's 2 to 3 hours compared to 10 to 12 like those out there get. So we were able to just kind of baby this along, and this was whenever they were in like baby plant stage, because I planted bare roots last year, and we kind of just babied them along, kept them watered, tried to keep them as cool as we could using the tree as shade and stuff. And then in the winter, I just left them alone. I only covered them one day out of the entire winter, and then they came back in the spring and gave us a ton of beautiful berries. So it can be done. You can keep them alive through the summer in Texas, but that's typically the season when most people growing strawberries lose their plants. All right, lime tree, still doing lime tree things. Basil. This basil is getting glorious. This is Momolo basil, and you can see the leaves on it are huge. You could use this in place of lettuce on sandwiches. There is a lettuce leaf variety of lettuce that is used that way, but these leaves are so big and glorious that you could do it the same with this. This one, I believe, is cinnamon basil. This is a volunteer, so I'm not entirely sure. But we also have Persian basil in here. There's lime basil, and I don't know what variety that is, but it is also a volunteer. All of these are growing very friendly with each other, and nothing is being impeded here. So even though it looks like a wild jungly mess, it's a healthy, happy jungly mess. So I will take it. I actually need to come harvest some of this for eating and consumption. So yay! The herb green stalk is trudging along. Actually, it's doing really well. It's doing better than I expected it to do at this point in the year, because usually it's much hotter than it has been. It's still in the 80s. We haven't had consistent days in the 90s yet. We've had 1 or 2 off days here and there spread out, but it hasn't been like consistent for several days in a row. Up here we have anise hyssop. This is doing pretty well. We have a yarrow over here. Obviously the mint is minting. Ornamental oregano, I almost forgot the name. Ornamental oregano, chamomile. Now this is starting to fizzle out, perfectly normal. This one can actually be harvested and dehydrated. It will be put into a jar to be used for tea. With this lavender here, both of those are just being consumed together in a nice calming tea. This is Mandalvian Dragon Balm, and it is starting to bloom. So this one I planted for pollinators. I didn't plant it for any sort of medicinal or tea or culinary use. This one is strictly to help make the butterflies and bees and other flying insects happy. Racina calendula, this is the medicinal variety typically used for skincare applications, especially useful for eczema and such. Then we have regular hyssop, which is useful for, it apparently makes a really tasty tea. And then we have rue. This one I planted for swallowtails, so if they can find it, hopefully they will have host plants there. We have tarragon, marshmallow, that's what these are here, these tall ones. I think that might be everything that is currently living in here. The thyme, of course, that's been in there forever. It's not going anywhere. All right, last we'll come over here, check out the little seedling station I have going on. This whole tray is zinnias, except the back row does have some teddy bear sunflowers. And then we have sunflowers here, cosmos, and we have some amaranth and, okay, so we have celosia back there, and then amaranth here, and then we have cosmos. There is mullein. I don't know if the rainstorm like drowned it. I think these are pretty full of water. Yeah, I need to dump the water out of there because they're really soggy. But everything other than too much water, everything looks really great. And probably next week we can get these zinnias and sunflowers and cosmos put into, there's a spider that keeps crawling on me. Yes, in a week or so we can get all this stuff transplanted in, except for those back there. Those are still a little small. But that is a look at the garden this first week of June 2025. It is slowly starting to heat up out here, but tomatoes are rolling in pretty steadily now. Peppers are rolling in pretty steadily now. Things are growing at a pretty fast pace at this point, so we should start to see a ton more food come out of the garden here within the next couple of weeks. All right, so before I sign off, I was gonna open this corn for you guys so we could see what it looks like inside of here. And it, like I said, it's not 100% pollination by any means, but I can feel kernels in there. So, let's see what we have in here. Look at this. All right, so we have corn. Again, this is the Montana lavender clay corn. I think it's a sweet corn. I'll look that up and try to put it right here if it's a sweet corn or if it's like a, you know, one you would use for tortillas or cornbread or something, but yay! But that's all that I have for you for this week. If you would like to continue to see how the garden grows and changes from week to week, please like, subscribe, and comment. All of your interactions with my videos have been greatly helpful in growing my channel, but otherwise, until next time, go find a way to get those garden manicures.